Good afternoon. My name is Ellen Diogardi. I am the events director for the Sag Harbor Express News Group. Welcome to the American Hotel and our Express Sessions event on the future of public space in Sag Harbor. This is our last Express session for 2019 in Sag Harbor. We will start up again in January. We take December off. In a moment, I will turn things over to the very capable Brian Boyhan, who will moderate today's discussion, and he will introduce our panelists. But I'd first like to thank everybody here at the hotel. Ted, Mary, Julian, Chef Jonathan, and their entire hardworking team for making us always feel so welcome. Yes, thank you. Thank you also to our lead sponsors, the Sag Harbor Variety Store. Thank you very much. Attorney John Leonard, I think John's here. Thank you. The Sag Harbor Chamber of Commerce, which is well represented here with many members and business leaders. Thank you all for coming. I'd also like to thank our session leaders, including Saybrook Capital. Luke Babcock, I saw checked in, is here. BNB Bank, the Washwick Agency, Dayton Ritz and Osborne, and the Adam Miller Group. Thank you, Adam is here with a whole table of people. Thank you so much for JCP Landscaping, Save Sag Harbor, Peak Savers, Fisher's Home Furnishings, the Law Office of Tiffany Scarlato, and the Sag Harbor Inn. We thank them all. And lastly, I will thank LTV and their crew, which has been with us since day one, filming these sessions and providing technical support. Thank you guys so much. And now, thank you, I'll turn it over to Brian.
Hi, folks. Welcome and good afternoon. I hope you're enjoying your lunch. I want to thank you all for coming and thank our panel. We have Sag Harbor Mayor Kathleen Mulcahy. We have landscape architect Ed Hollander, Sag Harbor Village trustee Jim Larocca, Mashashimuet Park board member Linley Hagen, planner Joseph Hagen, and Sag Harbor Cultural District founder Eric Cohen. These sessions that we do each month are for you. We hope that you're interested in these. We hope that you participate. We have a series of questions that I'll begin asking here in a moment to the panel. After that, we're going to open it up to questions from all of you. Today we're talking about the future of public spaces here in Sag Harbor. There's been a tremendous amount of change over the past couple of years. Notably, the work that's being done out on Long Wharf and the recently opened Steinbeck Park. But we also want to talk about some of the other spaces that we see here, Mashashimuet Park in particular, Marine Park, and really the future of planning and access to the village's parklands. So let's get started. Remember, please feel free to ask questions after we're finished here. I'll come around with the mic. Just bear with me a second. We're going to start with Kathleen. As mayor of the village of Sag Harbor, can you give us an update on two important projects involving public spaces, the redevelopment of Long Wharf and what is being done to improve water quality and sand quality at Havens Beach?
Thank you. Thank you to all of the Express. I mean, these sessions are wonderful. We'll miss it in December, but we'll be thrilled back in January. So Long Wharf is going along great. Everybody pick up your hand and knock on wood, because so far it's going along really, really well. The steel is going in. The vibration levels have been very, very low, almost insignificant. I hope Tracy agrees with me. And we are so far on schedule and doing great. We do have a couple of things that are going to change from the original design, which are also very exciting, and we are still looking for some funding for it, but we are quite confident it's going to happen. We are going to put some EV stations out there for electric cars down at the end by the windmill, which I think will be great to have for the village.
Nice.
Thank you. And we are also going to upgrade the wiring for both the transients, which this year we had a lot of issues on our transient docks because
I think you should say transient boats, not just transient people. Trying to be helpful.
boats and docks. But we had on Saturday afternoons, as many of you probably noticed your own selves, Saturdays and Sundays in the village, the power came down. So we had big problems out there with the boats where they just were not drawing enough power. So we are upgrading the transient decks, and then we are also trying desperately to put in very serious electric for the large yachts at the end. If we can put that in, it would stop them running their generators 24/7 for 100 days. That would be a big savings. They go through, the number is something astronomical, but it's like, and please do not quote me because I'm not sure I have it right, but it's something like 1,000 gallons a day to run those generators, and it's just crazy. So they are willing to pay much more money. We're looking for ways to do this, and it will pay back to the village within about 6 years, any money we put into it. So if anybody has a little extra money in their pocket, I'm always looking for it. I'm turning every grant rock upside down that's possible. But even with these things, we're still on schedule. It's going to be absolutely beautiful. Ed did a fabulous design, and it is going to be this wonderful place where people can walk and sit and enjoy, and we're thrilled to have that really become a big public space rather than just a place people went to.
For the benefit of us, what is the schedule at this point? What are we hoping for?
Somewhere between early May and early June. We're hoping for early May. So let's,
Okay.
as I say, just keep knocking on every piece of wood you see.
And I'm guessing weather has a lot to do with their ability to meet deadlines?
Absolutely. You know, if we have a couple of 27 days like we've had, 27-degree days, we've got problems ahead. But right now the steel is the biggest issue, getting that in, getting it going, and we are a little bit ahead of schedule on that. It's been so nice. So we've been lucky there. And
Can you just tell us a little bit about what the features might be at the end of the wharf there?
I can, but I think Ed can probably do it better. So I'm going to let Ed take 2 minutes and talk about that.
Thank you. Thank you. I think there were really two parts of what we did at Long Wharf to try and make it more pedestrian friendly while still maintaining, I think we maintained all of the parking places except for 4. But 2 or 3 main things we tried to address was A, how do you walk around the edge of Long Wharf and not feel like you're going to fall into the bay? Right. So we've actually expanded the area between the edge of Long Wharf and the parking area by a couple of feet. There'll be a guardrail that separates the cars, but then there will be a transition from the asphalt paving where the cars are to a wooden boardwalk, which is obviously a much more pedestrian-friendly type of material, with the thought that that boardwalk will continue, and there'll be room. It will be wide enough to have guardrail, benches, boardwalk, railing, so that people can flow easily along the sides of Long Wharf. And just jury-rigging some of the geometries out there that didn't make a lot of sense, I think we managed to capture about 30 feet of space at the end of Long Wharf that will now be accessible for seating and other kind of pedestrian Sag Harbor villager-type activities, as opposed to just F-150s circling, drinking coffee. Not that there's anything wrong with that.
Not there's anything wrong with it. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ed. And just lastly, Kathleen, if you can speak about Havens Beach.
Sure. So Havens Beach, we have a lot of things going on. We are putting in a new drain down there. We're replacing the sponges to take all the oils and bacteria out before it gets to the water. So that will help the water quality. That work will happen this spring. We're looking at it probably about a March. It's only a week's worth of work, which was very surprising to me. But so we're looking at it for this March. And then we're also going to put rain gardens in at Havens Beach along the road as you go up. So that's something East Hampton is paying for, which is very nice. Yes, East Hampton is paying for rain gardens there as well as in Marine Park, which will be lovely. Again, helping to get some of the flooding taken care of. And then the other great thing that we, again, thanks to East Hampton gave us what we fondly call the animal, and that is that big sand sifter that you see down at the beach. So this past summer, that went 5 times along the beach, picking up rocks and shells and glass and some of the things that came in from the dredging. It will continue to do, we'll do another 6 or 8 next summer, because we'll have it didn't start until July, the animal. And then it also is available to us. We now own it. East Hampton gave it to us. We fixed it up, and we own it. So if we had a huge storm that brought in a lot of straw or garbage onto the beach, we could get it out there on a day's notice, clean it up before that all washed back into the water. So all these things are a huge help.
Very good. Thank you. Ed, as someone who has been professionally involved in a number of projects in the village, including Long Wharf and the preliminary concepts for the John Steinbeck Waterfront Park, as well as private project like April and Eric's church on Madison Street, where do you see room for improvement in Sag Harbor? If you were planning for the future of the village, what public spaces would you like to see developed?
Well, I think we need to be very careful in how we view the village. I mean, there are great public spaces already. The cemeteries that I worked with April on fixing up, Oakland and Eastville, are classic old-time public spaces. Mashashimuet is a fabulous space. The parks that we have. I think the soul of this village, though, comes from the street life, the public spaces as we walk up and down streets, the front yards of houses that become part of the visual landscape, the trees, the streets, the organic nature of this village, the way no 2 streets have the same width, the same length, the same. I mean, it was clearly laid out by a bunch of drunken whalers, which is what gives the village its charm.
Yes.
And one of the things I think we need to be careful of is trying to make corners safer and straighten streets. There's a certain danger to the organic nature of this village, but it's also what gives the village its charm. And I can't tell you the number of people that have approached us professionally because what they want to do in their work is emulate Sag Harbor. How do we make Sag Harbor? Mm-hmm. And you can't make Sag Harbor with 24-foot wide streets and perfect sidewalks and everything being exactly right. So I think we need to be very careful about the idea of developing as well as preserving and keeping the soul of this village, I think, is in the organic nature of the streetscape, because that belongs to everybody, whether you're driving, whether you're walking, whether you're on a bicycle. That's what makes the heart and soul of the village. What we then do with Marine Park. I mean, Marine Park is an interesting place that could, it's just been there. Mashashimuet Park is a wonderful place, but it's just been there. I think the new playground is a great addition to that. I think Silly Farm is an opportunity to be had, whether it's workforce housing, whether it's parkland, whether it's parking, whether it's nature, whether it's drainage. But Silly Farm is kind of a wasteland, that area. And so that to me is the one spot that I've had my eye on with Robbie Stein and Aiden Korish, and really, really smart people in the village should think of what we can do with that will be a benefit to everybody.
Well, here's something that I can ask Jim and Kathleen in a little bit about what might happen over there, or what the village might consider doing with that. But we'll get back to that later. Jim, along with former Mayor Sandra Schroeder, you were a champion behind the now open John Steinbeck Waterfront Park. Can you tell us where plans are for the redevelopment of that park and what the village is looking at in terms of funding sources?
Sure. Excuse me. You noticed that my colleague sitting next to me, Ed Hollander, is the designer of the wharf, the redesigner of the wharf, and he has been the pro bono resource and designer of the new Steinbeck Park. What you probably have not heard is we considered but rejected the idea of renaming Sag Harbor, at least the waterfront, as Hollandia. Will not be happening. But we've gotten so. No doubt. We're, believe it or not, just finishing the paperwork on this effort, which goes back 4.5 years. That's a book that no one will read. But we do expect to have it, the paperwork done. And it's important because in the grant world and the funding world that we now project to go to, federal government, the various state, the county, we have to have the status of a licensee on the property. It's not enough that we are under contract. We have to be done. So that's, we're at the threshold, but we haven't been able to step over into that funding world yet. We hope that'll be resolved very soon. The planning and design you've seen so far is conceptual, and I have made it a practice during this whole history to be accessible and accepting of every idea that everybody has put forward. Right now, we could fill Central Park with all of the good ideas that people have given to us. We have 1.25 acres, so the planning and design process now will really be one of culling and choosing and trying to maximize what we can do on this very modest parcel, but with a spectacular asset which money can't buy, and that is the view to the west and the best sunset location in the village. So that begins now. We have a body of people who have said to us they would like to see it sort of the way it looks right now, which is as a green with some amenities, some vegetation, some trees and so forth, a little more landscaping perhaps, but basically an open green, all the way through to a fully designed space with specific amenities and design features. That'll be a function of the process that we have, the resources that we have, and the choices we make. I don't express at this point a preference. What we like is that so many people have been willing to offer an idea. What I am going to do is ask the Express sometime in this next period of time to, through your ability, the paper's ability to survey the public, is to have a specific process for inviting input for the park development. Beyond that, we will have a committee. We have a committee. We've had one. We will do all of the things governmental partnerships do to advance this. And the result, I think, will be as good as we expect it to be. And it puts in mind, at least to the broader subject of today, what do we do with public space? Sag Harbor is unique, certainly on the South Fork, for many reasons. We have a charming village, as has been observed, and its evolution is interesting, and its history is interesting, and everything else. But we would be nothing without the harbor. Our orientation to the harbor is beginning to reflect the modern era. I was in the state government, and I can tell you all over the state, most places that had an early history, the waterfront was part of the commerce and part of the transportation and the communication networks. And so villages built their backs to the waterfront. Here we had a number of earlier uses, and as they gave way, the first people to be heard from were the people who would like to build condominiums. That's not a public choice we've been anxious to make. What we've succeeded at Steinbeck Park is turning back that idea for there, but we still have a waterfront that is not yet fully reoriented to the new economy, which is tourism and recreation, or to the quality of life that the village now demands. This waterfront needs to serve the people who live, work, do business, raise their families, and contribute to this community. And the highest and best use of that property, in my judgment, is not walls of apartments along the waterfront. So with the properties that we will be discussing in the years ahead, that will be a question. As you know, the shipyard has been sold. Its future is not known. The properties on the wharf itself are subject to change in coming years. we need to be prepared and thinking about all of those spaces in terms of what values we assign to this. In my judgment, the shorthand on all of this is, at this stage of our lives as a community, our environment is the economy, and that economy is the environment. And so what we do next, I think Steinbeck is a good starting example. The further rehabilitation and reorientation to the wharf from its fully commercial days to the days we have now is the kind of thing we're talking about. And finally, that orientation should include some serious thinking about the waterfront community to the west of Main Street. The two red brick buildings, the Gasball site, the Scavone site, all of these need to fit into our waterfront revitalization plan. This community, small as it is, has one of the most vigorous waterfront revitalization processes of any of the villages in Suffolk County. And the values embedded in that are the values that really form what we want to do in this community.
Briefly-
So all of that has to happen.
Briefly, you mentioned the gas ball site. Is that a property that the village has a target on for acquisition?
Well, that would overstate it. What we had was a target on an idea that was being put forward, where the utility, under the regulations it lives under, was obliged, after the property was cleaned up, to seek a market for it to recover monies that would then be returned to ratepayers. And they, it's 2 or 3 years ago now, came forward and told us the $1 a year that we had been paying would no longer be apt, and they were going to charge us at a market value for the property, and the market value being based on its maximum use as a fully developed site with, I forget how many units, make your hair stand up. And so we, in Village Hall, approached the company at a higher level, and we negotiated a 5-year extension of the current $1 a year lease. We're, I guess, halfway through that at this point. So we have these couple of years to identify and choose the future we would like to see for that lot.
Thanks.
And I would also say, again, that the least attractive idea, at least to me, would be to fill it up with more condominiums.
Yeah. Thanks, Jim. Linley. You've been a board member of Mashashimuet Park. Your body has launched an ambitious fundraising effort to offset the cost of a new and very popular playground. The park, this is actually kind of two questions, if I'm parsing this out. The park has hosted a number of events in support of that effort and is now home to theater productions, music, and more. How does the board see the traditional use of the park expanding to include other offerings for the community?
Great. Thanks for having me. I'm on the board. Greg Scavone is the president of the board, and he couldn't come. He asked me to come, and I really feel really wonderful about our park, because I never really knew much about the park like everybody here. They think it's a secret society. Ed said that to me. He goes, God, you guys are up there. I have no idea what goes on. And we want you guys, everybody to feel that that space is a private park, but it's open to use for anything anybody has ideas for. We allowed the Bay Street Theater to do their production. It really wasn't a fundraiser for us, but we love the idea. It brings people into the park, and that's what's important. It's a beautiful space. What people don't know is we're 165 acres. And we have property at Archibald Way. We have land back behind the woods there. And it's, again, it's just a beautiful space, open space. And that's what it was meant to be, like open space and a safe, beautiful space for children to come and use. So on that vein, we did the playground, which if you haven't been up there, you've got to get up there. It's just an amazing playground. And we have in the future, we're trying to do a few more things. Like you had asked me about what other stuff would we do there. We were thinking of doing amphitheater in one area, which would be really nice to have people talking or music, whatever. It's quite lovely, and we could show you the spaces. Anytime anyone wants to go up there, I'll walk you through the areas. It's just beautiful. We also wanted to do a phase 2 for our playground. We wanted to do one that's got more older kind of bodybuilding equipment or workout equipment, another a court, which we can do maybe a full-size basketball court, so people can play basketball, which is what we get asked a lot. Interesting. We want to do maybe a running track up there, which anyone could use, but the school would like a running track, and so that's a nice idea. We just don't exactly know where to put it yet. There's walking trails that go right into the Long Pond Greenbelt. It's absolutely beautiful, and if you haven't been up there, please take a walk up there. It's stunning, and so nice to have it open. I just wanted to say that Mrs. Russell Sage bought that park and playground, the park, in 1907, and she deeded it later on. It was given over to the Sag Harbor. It became the Sag Harbor Association. So that's where, in 1920. And so it's been run that way as a private playground or park. And we get revenue from the school using our using the fields, and we get revenue from the tennis. We also have a building there that we rent out, so that's the revenue. It is not taxpayer funded in any way. Nobody gives us any money from that, and it's not in the gate. It's just saying that people somehow feel that it's a public and we get money. So raising the $375,000 for the playground was privately raised, and that we feel good about. And please keep that in your thoughts still, because I think we're down to the last $50,000. We've raised that money, and we're going to try to do phase 2. And I think the board feels very strongly that the area, and take a walk up there, to leave it as open space is a beautiful thing, and is nice. But we are open to any ideas. Anyone wants to do something up there, so please come forward. We have meetings every month, the second Wednesday, 7:00. You can write first, and we'd put you on the agenda if you have any ideas you'd want to ask us about. Yeah, I think that's all, really.
Thanks, Linley.
Okay.
Jonas, as someone involved in urban planning and transportation, are there ways to make Sag Harbor Village more pedestrian-friendly in an effort to support the mission of local cultural institutions, parks, and other public spaces? Where is the village succeeding, and where does it need work?
Oh, thanks, Brian. Thanks, Brian and Catherine and Gavin and to everybody for inviting me to be on such an illustrious panel. Pleasure to be here. Well, I want to start out saying people love to watch other people. This is something that we observe. It's why everybody comes to Main Street of Sag Harbor. They want to see and be seen and stroll around in a public space. And as much as we can do to extend that public space, we'll be extending that downtown feeling. Let's say we could extend it up Main Street towards the library, which is a project that Eric has been working on for a while, so I won't steal his thunder. But we could go even further. We could go to the intersection of Glover Street on our way to the park. And if we could extend Main Street, we could extend the area that's a destination that could also encourage people to park a bit further away and to walk a little more, get some more exercise. And I think there's really a lot of potential to doing that. I also want to mention that in these conversations, sometimes we forget to think about children. How many people here have children or grandchildren that are, let's say, up to 13 years old or so? Nobody? Wow. All right, very few. Okay, well, our population is dwindling quickly. We're like the Shakers. But think about a small child for a moment. Maybe they go to school in Sag Harbor Elementary School, and then where might they like to go? Where would a child possibly want to go in Sag Harbor? Maybe they'd like to go to the park. Anywhere else? Possibly the library. That they might want to go to the library. They might even want to come to the wharf shop, right? Yeah, look at some toys. Maybe the 5 and 10. Maybe hang out with their friends on Main Street for a while, get an ice cream or something like that. Now, how many of you would be comfortable letting your 9-year-old walk from the school to the library to the park? No? Why?
Oh, yeah.
You would? Yeah?
My daughter did.
Your daughter did? Okay, would you feel comfortable letting them do that
My
now?
daughter,
Yes, 100% comfortable. Okay, that's interesting because I don't see it happening a lot. And I've got some nieces and nephews that live right in the village.
yeah, exactly.
I don't feel
That should come to the American
right.
Hotel.
Yeah. Right. I don't see a lot of kids walking to school. I don't see a lot of kids walking from the park to the school, or the school to the park, or to the library, and so on. And I wouldn't feel comfortable letting, let's say, my 7-year-old nephew do it. It's just, I don't think it's safe out there. And, somebody might say, well, nobody's died in the last 20 years or so. Unfortunately, there aren't enough deaths to really use deaths as, traffic fatalities. I mean, there are a few. There was Anna Pump in Bridgehampton. There was somebody in Montauk recently. There was a young woman in East Hampton by the CVS, so they do happen occasionally. But just think about this for a moment. Would you really feel comfortable letting a small child walk around? And why shouldn't that be possible? And there are things that we can do to make the village safer for people to walk and bike. When I went to the elementary school, there were a bunch of kids that biked to school. I haven't seen a bike there. I don't think there's not even a bike rack there at the school. So if you'd allow me to indulge me for a moment just to mention bicycles, these are amazing vehicles for this village. It takes about 10 minutes to bike from the village line near Ligonier Brook over to Havens Beach. So the entire village is bikeable, and we see a lot of them in the summer. The Sag Harbor Partnership recently put some bike racks on Main Street, and if you took a look, they're really full in the summertime, and this is a great thing. Think about each bicycle as being an automobile that isn't there, and how much space they save. And so these are people walking around, spending money at different places, stimulating our car economy. So I think it's a real boon for Sag Harbor, and we could do a lot more for bicycles. But to answer the question, I think Sag Harbor is simply succeeding because of its DNA, because as Ed said, it was laid out by drunken sailors. It's a pedestrian village created before the automobile and before contemporary zoning practices. None of the village is to code. It couldn't exist today. If you tried to build it today, it wouldn't happen. But everybody loves to come and walk around here, and everybody wants to be here. So isn't that a paradox? There's a lot of room for improvement. We could connect different destinations. We could make them more desirable places to be. We have beautiful historical homes on Main Street, and these are also part of our public space. And why shouldn't somebody be able to walk or bike comfortably, all the way from Main Street up to the park? Has anybody tried to cross the intersection around the Getty station and the park? Have you done that on foot recently? Not a particularly pleasant experience, right? So there's a lot we can do. I think we can think about our children walking around the village from the schools all the way to Havens Beach. Why not? And I will leave it at that. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Jonas. Eric, as one of the founders of the village's Sag Harbor Cultural Heritage Weekend and a proponent for the establishment of a cultural district in the village, what changes do you think could be made near cultural institutions like the John Germain Library, the Sag Harbor Whaling Museum, Bay Street Theater, to make them more visible to residents and/or allow them to expand their programming or public spaces?
Well, one of the... It doesn't. I don't hear me. Oh, there
There
we
we
go. Okay, good. One of the problems of going last is that pretty much everything I had planned to say has already been said. So I have some remarks that I wrote down because of old brain. I was afraid I would forget things, but everyone's already said them. But nevertheless, you'll have to listen to some of it again. I wanted to start. I will get to the specifics of what you asked, but I wanted to start with a little background. It echoes some things that Ed and Jonas said. And when we think of public space, we mostly limit our thinking to parks and preserves and the waterfront, but streets typically represent the largest area of public space a community has. Streets and sidewalks can be up to 25% of a community's public space and up to 70% of publicly owned land. So, so thank you. It's good to be validated. So any discussion of the future of public space should necessarily include streets and sidewalks, which is a long-winded way of saying thanks for asking me about South Main Street. Streets play an important role in animating the social and economic life of a community. They're the connective tissue that ties businesses into the downtown and people into the community. An important function of streets, of course, is to facilitate travel from one place to another. But prior to the introduction of the automobile, streets were more of a social gathering place to do business, to play, to meet and have discussions. In recent times, those streets have become almost the exclusive terrain of motor vehicles. So it's vitally important that when we think about the future of public space in Sag Harbor, we include restoring the balance between the needs of mobility and other street activities, that we ensure that our streets function in a way that accommodates the needs of the whole community. In thinking about the part of Main Street south of the business district, which is the area that inspired the creation of the cultural district, we need to look at why it doesn't currently function well as a public space. What changes can we make that will make it a more pleasant gathering place for people? How can we encourage visitors to stroll further south than the Monument Triangle? One thing that's been said here and is well documented is that people like to be where other people are. That's why tables outside of restaurants are so popular. With that in mind, we can look at what can be done in less used parts of the village to make them more attractive gathering places. Possible answers, and I'm not pushing any one of these, I'm just saying they're possible, might include flexible public seating, public art, the availability of food, making roads feel less intimidating to walk across, better wayfinding signage, more public events, public restrooms, and wider sidewalks. And one last thing, we also need to think about laws and codes and how to make sure they're working well for the entire community. Sometimes regulations in public spaces put unnecessary limits on activities and uses of the community. For every rule that we create and enforce in a public space, we have to ask ourselves, does this truly make the space more usable for everyone? I hope that answers your question.
I think so. Thank you, Eric. So I'm going to turn this over to you folks. We've touched on an awful lot: open space, public spaces, waterfront, streets. Who has a question for our panel? Just give us your name.
Thank you. My name is Carol Williams, and I'm here out of interest and gratitude to all of you. I'm also here to represent Friends of Havens Beach. And I did want to say a few words in addition to what has already been said.
Sorry?
Where
are you? Right here? Oh, that's why. Okay. Sorry. If you would do me a favor, if you could walk over there and talk to the right. It's just stuck up on me.
I'm sorry. Excuse me.
Thank you so much.
So where do you want me to be?
Right there at the podium would be fantastic.
Oh, there's a podium.
So
I'm
much.
sorry. This is embarrassing. I wouldn't have spoken. Well, I want to just put things a little bit in context about Havens Beach. First of all, it's along with the park, but more so, the oldest public space in Sag Harbor. It was a gift from Mrs. Havens to the village of Sag Harbor, 20 acres and the beach, at the request of the Ladies Village Improvement Society, who were very, very far-sighted in 1924 in realizing that access to water was going to become something very scarce and very precious. And it did become this real treasure to the village, where children learned to swim. There were, at one time it was wetlands with a little creek. There was wonderful fresh water there. Over the years, it fell foul to what Mr. Larocca was speaking about, kind of turning your back on the waterfront, in the sense of it became an area where people put things they didn't know where else to put, notably dredge spoil. I'm not now referring to the dredge spoil that was put on the beach, but the dredge spoil that filled what used to be wetlands. I mean, there are fields there, 20 acres of them, now filled. A couple of years ago, we had the disaster of dredge spoil actually being put on the beach, which I hope will never be repeated. In the spring, we're looking at, I'm going now from the past to the future. We have a huge drainage problem in Sag Harbor, a problem with flooding that I think everybody recognizes. The streets are filling with water, pretty much everywhere, but some places more than others. The setup at Havens Beach is that there's a man-made drain that goes straight out to the harbor. It didn't end up being the way it was supposed to be. It was supposed to meander and be a wetland and encourage the life of the natural life. So it was straight. They put some filters in to try to prevent all the road runoff, bacteria, oil, etc., from going straight into the water, but it hasn't worked. We know that by the great, I don't know how many people let their children swim there anymore. I'm not sure that I would. My children learned to swim there, but I wouldn't put a toe in right near the drain now. And now we're expanding that with another drain. I understand why we're doing that. I don't think it's a good idea. I understand there's technology to try to lessen the amount of pollution that's going to come through, but in fact more water is being drained than previously directly onto the beach. I'd like to look really maybe it's too late to stop that, but I just want to say that that park is the treasure of Sag Harbor. It lets us all know that we connect to nature in the most profound ways. We mustn't spoil it. I think that if we're looking ahead, we need a connected solution to the drainage problem in Sag Harbor. It needs to be everywhere, not just at the beach. We need rain gardens, but we need many of them. We need make sure our catch basins work, and we need Havens itself, our waterfront, to be part of the solution. If it could be restored to being a salt marsh again, which is not impossible by any means. There are grants available to do this, and we have plenty of people here who want to be involved. As the waters rise, as they will, it will be a place for the waters to be contained and prevent flooding from that way, and it will allow us to release our dirty road runoff water in a more subtle way where it can be absorbed slowly into this marsh. So I really urge us with all our open spaces to look at the big picture. It all connects. We're going to be looking at some hard times, and we need to be a little forward-looking.
Let's let our panel respond to that. So, Kathleen, you want to take a shot at that? I mean, water is both a beauty and a problem, especially in these times of climate change and rising waters. Any thoughts?
Yeah. Carol, yes, many of these plans are in place and going to happen. So some of those things are going to happen. It doesn't mean that they are the end. It just means that they are the beginning or a middle place right now as we continue to try to fix things. And yeah, I'd love to see it all go back to a salt marsh. I'd love to get the dogs out of the non-approved dog park and let some of that become more marshy and different ways to do it. So it is. We are going to put the sponges in, we're going to do all that, but we are continually thinking, and we will continue to work on that. Rain gardens, I did the math. So 3 years ago, both East Hampton and Southampton said that a percentage of the CPF fund will go to water quality. And we had, I believe, and this is all, what's been told to me over the months, we had about 3 months to put together a bunch of plans. And we went and we got a number of plans approved, and now they are slowly happening and coming to fruition. So there will be about 10,000 square feet of rain gardens between Marine Park and Havens Beach and that area that will go in this year, plus this pervious pavement that will go in along Bay Street. On the Southampton side, we are just going out, we're just about to approve the vendor to do 22,000 of acres of rain gardens on the Southampton side. That's half an acre of rain gardens that will go in between the parking lots, the base, down by the curve on Glover, out on Redwood, etc. So those are all great starts, and what we want to do is continue that. And even Silly Farm, that's another place for more rain gardens and more things that can solve some of the flooding. So it is a problem that cities all around the world are facing. Look at Venice. The water is coming, and we are trying to do what we can. Every little bit helps.
The only thing I would think we might work with this one. Rather than looking at pieces of puzzles, rather than looking at the Dreen and the this and the that, I think if we can take the Havens area and look at it in a holistic way, where we understand the larger ecosystem from upland to wetlands to marine, and it's a difficult thing to do because money is allocated for individual projects. But if we can take a somewhat more holistic view of what it is today, how did it get that way, what do we want it to be, what's realistic, I think it will make our funding and make our implementation more effective. And it's always a problem because it's hard to look at 20 acres. It's easy to look at 2,000 square feet. But getting the 20 acres and figuring out what that wants to be through input of everybody in the community will end up down the road with the most successful kind of conclusion to what this area should be, because as you said, it's one of the great spaces of the village. My daughter was swimming there, we've all hung out there, and it should be as wonderful for the next generation of kids as it was for our kids.
Is that being done now? Is there a plan to look at the Havens Beach area holistically?
Today, no.
Okay.
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow.
Yeah, it doesn't mean it can't happen tomorrow.
Yep.
But
Sure. Okay.
that's, as we move forward on different
Thanks. Jonas, you would
Sure, if I could just throw in to the mayor, you can sometimes use rain gardens strategically to also make intersections safer. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
Thanks.
You mentioned the corner of Main and Glover. So.
Who else? Luke.
Me up there or stand here is okay? I think you're far enough. Okay. Thank you, Brian. And thank you, the whole team that puts these together. I got to say it. I've been to several of these, and sometimes the subject doesn't actually sound that interesting, but I got to eat lunch, so I come, and then I find it very stimulating once I'm here. So suddenly I'm asking another question, like I do every time. Now for my somewhat controversial question. There's one constituency that doesn't seem particularly welcome in any of our public spaces, and that is dogs. Dogs. I know I'm opening up a can of worms here. But if you think about it, Havens Beach, they're not permitted on the beach. Mash Park, they're not permitted. Marine Park, dogs aren't permitted. And I'm not sure if we've established any rules for the new Steinbeck Park. Contrast that with Central Park in New York City, which most would argue is the greatest park in the world. Very dog friendly. Our ocean beaches from Southampton to Montauk, very dog friendly within certain hours, of course. And I'm not a big dog park person. I'm not saying we need to have dogs running wild, but I am a fan of citizens being able to passively enjoy our open spaces with their dogs. And I think if we want to have people use our spaces more, allowing them to be there with their dogs leashed is a way to populate those spaces. And even if you think of the public streets in the village, except for this 2-block section here, there's no waste receptacles, there's no bags for picking up after your dogs. So we know there's some bad apples out there. There's some dog owners that do not take care of their dogs properly, but we want to encourage that. Encourage them to take care of their dogs and encourage them hopefully to use our open spaces. So I don't know if there's any...
We've actually considered making Steinbeck Park only for dogs with no people allowed.
Perfect. I like dogs better than people. So just if anyone has any thoughts about enabling our citizens, our law-abiding citizens, to enjoy their parks with their dogs. Thank you.
Anybody want to respond to the dog question?
Well, I think it's, I mean, listen, I think just as a co-author of Steinbeck Park, I don't see any reason why dogs should not be able to participate as fully as people do, as long as people are responsible and do pick up after their dogs. That's always the issue. I mean, I don't want to go into the chemical traits of dog urine and feces as we're enjoying our desserts. But I think having dogs in the park is a good thing. I've walked our dog all through the village all the time. My wife picks up after it. Dee Yardley has agreed to put a garbage can back down on the walk on Long Island Avenue, which took a little cajoling, but Dee agreed to that. But I think you're right. Having garbage cans where people can put dog waste is very important. And dogs are members of the village, too.
Yes. Are dogs currently restricted from Marine Park and Havens Beach and... Jim?
At Marine Park is posted no dogs.
Okay.
But in
Even
fact,
on a leash?
In fact, it is not enforced.
Mhm.
And it's a regular venue from everything from the yachts where the crews walk 3 or 4 dogs at a time. And probably the only enforcement that goes on down there are boat people like me who brace people who don't pick up.
Linley?
Luke, if you get together with me at some point, why don't we make a proposal? We could maybe go to the park board. Maybe we could do something up at the Mashashimuet. They have not been positive about that, but if you come with a good proposal, and we could go look at the park, and you could figure an area. I mean, it couldn't be the whole park, but maybe an area. I'd be more than welcome to work with you on that.
Thank you. I have to say, in my 30-some-odd years here, I have watched walls come down from the Whaling Museum to the Yacht Club to the library, and now Mashashimuet Park. Will wonders never cease?
Hi, everyone. Thanks, panel, for being here for us. My name's Adam Miller, and I have a question about the traffic pattern on the north part of Main Street here, which seems to be always problematic, and I can recall maybe a decade ago it was redone. To me, there doesn't seem to be much improvement in that traffic pattern coming from 114 and going over the bridge. And that often, I think, has a chilling effect on people even coming into the village. So is there considerations for that being redone? I know that has to be done in correlation with the state, but that just seems to me an obvious issue with this village versus many of the other villages. Thank you for your time.
Thanks.
Hi. Yes, you're right. It's pretty much of a mess down there. So one of the things that we are looking at starting this summer season is having at least one of our traffic control officers down there as a pedestrian control officer. So really trying to, we're not going to redo and put a circle or a fancy circle in or anything like that, but we are going to try to have at least one person there for the busy times who are going to help the pedestrians so that it isn't as soon as one pedestrian gets to the corner, somebody else steps into the crosswalk, and there are cars there for 5 and 10 minutes as people go by. So that is the the one short-term solution we're looking at, and of course, long-term, you never know.
And why is the village? Why is the village so against the circle? I mean, it seems in Europe that circles are widely used, and is that just something that can't be done given the 114? Or
I think a couple things. A, it goes back to the do no harm to the village, and we need to be very careful about trying. We start to mess with the fabric of the village in trying to do good, and before we perform surgery on the village, I think Kathleen's approach of allowing pedestrians to cross and then allowing cars to go and allowing pedestrians to cross and allowing cars to go is a first step before we start digging up and trying to rebuild the village with some engineer's vision of what would be a more efficient way to move cars through it.
I would just like to add also that traditionally traffic circles are not easily to design in a pedestrian-friendly manner. So while you would improve the situation for cars moving through there, you'd make life hell for pedestrians.
If I could just throw my 2 cents in, with all due respect to everybody's opinions, I think there are thoughtful things that could be done to improve infrastructure for pedestrians in the village. We just have to be careful about what we do, and of course respect the village's DNA. But there are solutions out there. We're not the only pedestrian village in the entire world, and these things have been done very nicely in other locales, and there are examples abound of things that we could do. Thank you.
Can I just say,
Right here?
definitely. No, if I recall, and I don't know if any of Jim, you were on the board at the time, and I know Kathleen wasn't, they all came up and there was a survey done for a roundabout down there in the fire department and so on. There wasn't quite enough room for them to get around. They were a couple feet shy of the space. So it has been looked into in the past, and it was said no, no, no.
You're right, Nada. It was looked into. There were various issues. It's also village streets and state streets working together. So there are so many moving parts to it. But yes, it was looked at, and it just couldn't get big enough without destroying buildings.
Thanks, Kathleen. Another question? I see somebody down there. Excuse me.
Hi, I'm Helen Atkinson Barnes, and a few people on the panel mentioned how people really enjoy being with other people. I'd also like to add to that, people feel safe when they're around other people. And working at the Retreat Domestic and Sexual Violence Prevention Agency, there have been some really interesting recent studies showing how important public spaces are, open public spaces where people feel connected, people feel supported. And so I love the efforts here in this village to continue to improve what we've got, which is great already, but could be even better. Thinking about Steinbeck Park in particular, I'm interested in thinking about how, or hearing your views on the panel about how we make sure that space is integrated and accessible and not closed off. One thing in particular, somebody mentioned the park, the walkway along Long Island Avenue, which is a pretty space, but because of all the grasses that are very overgrown and it's a very narrow path, a lot of times people don't even walk along it because it seems maybe there are too many ticks or whatnot. So I just want to put that out there as we think about improving our public spaces to make sure that they are, fully accessible and, people want to be there and feel seen and are able to be seen and feel safe.
Well, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, one of the opportunities that Steinbeck presents is the ability to bring the diverse members of our community together. That's what public parks have always done, to bring people together from all walks of life, all socioeconomic categories, everybody becomes an equal when they're in John Steinbeck Park, watching the sunset over the cove, which belongs to all of us. I think you make another good point about the Long Island Avenue path, that it is narrow and a little overgrown and leads to the kind of the issue of Silly Farm. One of the things that I think the village, and I didn't answer, one of the things I think the village doesn't have that it could have, that Silly Farm is a possibility for, would be to actually set up a large public garden area where people could come in, as other villages have, and have 10-foot or 15-foot square vegetable gardens. We'd have to do some soil remediation, but that would be another place where people could gather and take advantage of the public property that the village has in a way that encourages people to interact together.
Mm-hmm. Eric?
I don't know if, and I'm sure some of you have, seen in last Sunday's Times a column by Nicholas Kristof about loneliness. And one of the things he wrote about is that in many communities, they are establishing park benches that are meant to encourage conversation between strangers. So they'll put a sign on the bench saying, if I'm sitting here, I'm open to conversation. And I think that would be a lovely idea for Steinbeck Park.
We've actually had about 3 people send that to us, and that is on our planning list.
Do you are you of a like mind? Do you believe if you build it, they will come? Do you believe that if you create these opportunities, they will be used? I say that because I see so much change occurring in our culture. The way we connect with each other, we do it not in face-to-face, we do it on cell phones, or we do it on the internet. Do you believe that there is a need for the public spaces? I'm playing devil's advocate here, but I'm concerned about my fellow man and not getting out and doing it. But is there a way to, once you've built it, to actually encourage use for it? Jim?
I would refer all of you to the writings of William Holly White, who wrote The Organization Man, but he also wrote the last 25 years of his life about what brings people into town. First question he asked is, where do people sit? Answer, anybody? Where there are seats. In New York, there was a period of about 10 or 15 years where every public wall outside of church and everything else were being fitted with spikes and sawtoothed steel. Mm-hmm. And so there's a whole body of work about the very question you're answering. And somebody mentioned it, one of his rules, observations, was people are attracted to places where there are other people. We had this, I've only been on, it's my 5th year as trustee. First year or so I was, we had a big argument about cafes and about street seats cafes. We had a couple of mayors in a row who were absolutely opposed to it. I was on the side of those who like to have a cafe in front of every part of Main Street, for all of the reasons that I think are now apparent. The sociability of it, it makes our village one of the most attractive destinations in terms of, you wander around East Hampton, there's no place to sit. You wander around Southampton, there's no place to sit. We have places to sit now. Mm-hmm. Cafe life, proven by how many centuries in Europe and other places, is something that people are drawn to. And we've accomplished it. I'd like to see even more of it. So on all of these things, if you build it, they will come. Listen to what people tell us by their behavior already. That's where we're starting on the park. As we watch people define and discover it, will tell us what works and what doesn't. But I think it's absolutely clear, comfortable places to sit, places that attract other people who will in turn attract other people, all constitute part of an answer in this electronic age of what people like to do. And finally, if White drew heavily on what you see in Italy and other places in Europe, but the passeggiata. After dinner every night in every small town in Italy, everybody goes to the piazza, to the square. And what do? Nothing. They sit on benches, they talk to one another, the older women in one place, the men over here, and interestingly, young lovers tend to canoodle in the middle where everyone can see them. So there's a lot to be learned from how people behave. And I think what we're already seeing here is in the 5 years that I've observed this, we have become a much more sociable destination. And I think that is a very positive thing for this town.
I could just
Jonas?
Yeah, sure. Brian, thanks a lot for bringing that up. I'm glad that you're concerned for our fellow man, and I want to thank Jim for mentioning the great William White. He did some amazing work on public space. If we can think of the sidewalks, the parks, and so on, think of that as our hardware, and then think of the things that could possibly happen there as the software. So there's different programming activities that we can do. We can have concerts, like when we have the community band, or we've had the farmers market for a number of years now. That's a wonderful thing that draws people into the public space. And then just reflect for a moment on the diversity of our community, and if that diversity is reflected in the people that we see in the public space. To my mind, it isn't necessarily. I think we have a lot more diverse community than what we see walking around. And just think about that for a moment. Don't want to make anybody feel too uncomfortable, but how can we make different communities feel as welcome as possible into the public space and create the most democratic public space possible?
Eric?
I just want to add, going back to your original question to me, the things we're talking about here are exactly what is missing on the southern part of Main Street, where we would like to see more people spend time, but they don't, because there are no amenities to make that a comfortable place for people to hang out. Now, the library has a plaza, but the plaza's down off of the street where it's not particularly visible. People do hang out there sometimes, but we could do so much more to make that a comfortable and inviting place for people to hang out in that area around the Whelan Museum, the Custom House, the library, and also make it possible for people to find that area. You know, so many people I see on weekends walk up and down Main Street. They get to Fisher's Antiques, they stop, you know, come back this way. They never think about going to, and it's beautiful. It's a beautiful walk. Thank you.
It really is. I was thinking earlier about that part of town, and I think of the steps in front of the John Germain Library, which on a sunny afternoon is one of the sweetest places to sit.
Well, the Whaling Museum and the Customs House are probably underutilized spaces. I know we've done a little work with Bob and the Whaling Museum people, because they're I don't know the Custom House, but the Whaling Museum is definitely an opportunity is sitting there.
Tracy?
Tracy Mitchell with the Bay Street Theater. I'm glad to hear that we're going to have a police officer this summer, but I'd like to go one step further with Ed's idea of having that bird's eye view from when the wharf is finished and Steinbeck Park is usable and that entire circle, because I can tell you that as probably the person that has crossed from Bay Street across the street more than anyone in this room, that I have nearly been hit 6 times in 12 years, that I have had staff members that have been very close to being hit to the point of where you're slamming on the car so they know that you're there. So I'm just hoping that, because when you're coming from the 114 area, most of those cars do not look to the right at the wharf. They are busy looking at this side, and now they're also going to be looking at the park. So I just encourage that sort of overview when all of this comes together, and we are hoping that more people will be pedestrians.
Let me just ask a question of the group, and don't read anything into my question. Would you like to see a traffic light at that location? Because?
Because there's many different roads coming and going, and there's so much. You've got 2 roads coming off the wharf, 114.
Can you take the mic, please?
Then I can't point with my fingers. I think it's part of that kind of what makes Sag Harbor wonderful also makes it less wonderful. No planner in their right mind would have 114 coming down with two parts of Main Street, with two roads off of Long Wharf, and then Long Island Avenue all coming together. I mean, it creates a situation that is, by definition, and then the fact that Sag Harbor has become, and this is part of it, Sag Harbor has become the bypass for daily traffic to East Hampton and Amagansett. That's the big picture that Sag Harbor is suffering from, and that's why the traffic backs up on 114, all the way past the gas station every afternoon to go over there. I don't know how you solve it from an engineering standpoint. I think you need to solve it from a human standpoint, which is controlling cars and controlling people so that there's a logic. Because right now there are no stop signs. There's no way for anyone to know. It's a game of chicken. Right. But that, I think Kathleen's idea of a couple of TCOs down there directing cars, directing people is the way to do it simple, easy, effective, not damage the infrastructure, and make people safe for very little money.
Yeah, I think having human beings down there, I think when the TCOs are on duty during the summer to help people back in and out of parking on Main Street is a huge advantage. Years ago, Ted Conklin imagined them all wearing little white uniforms and helping people park their cars, which might be going a little bit too far, but actually having them there on Main Street during the summer is really a big help, I think.
Sure. I just want to throw in that Sag Harbor also has people walking and driving outside a few months in the summer, so we could also think about solutions that might work if there isn't necessarily a TCO available for that. It's actually quite expensive if you add up the man hours.
Thanks, Jonas. Eric?
One second, Eric, if you would mind going over there because you're right on the PA. Oh, please, thank you.
How far do I have to go?
Just like
Over
there.
You have to go across the street, please.
So anyway, hello. Okay. I don't know why I had to come this far to ask a question, but this thing about the south side of town and trying to lure pedestrians down there, et cetera, et cetera. I think that there's a fundamental problem with it, which is starting at Union Street, it becomes a heavily residential neighborhood. It feels private. And I don't understand how you're going to get past that feeling. You have a density right at Union Street with the library, the Whelan Museum, the Customs House, and now the church. But you go past that, and you're now sort of bothering people in a way that seems counterintuitive. And so why concentrate on that as a problem to solve as opposed to accept it as a parameter that we work within, and then figure out how to enliven or invite or do whatever in a more public-friendly way from that area back north again. And I'd also like to add that April and I, as planning for the church, and thanks to Ed for huge help on designing the gardens for the church, that's intended as a public space as well. That will also be Wi-Fi'd and stuff, so that it's encouraging people to come and hang out there. That'll probably help spill over into the library and the Whelan Museum as well. So
I think that I would be the
Can I go home now?
Yeah, please sit down. I think I'd be the logical person to answer what you've put out there. And I'm not sure that in my thinking or anyone else's thinking, the ideas we're talking about go much beyond the Whelan Museum and the library. I mean, sure, it's lovely for people to walk further on their own if they feel like strolling down and visiting Canios or going to the park, but I don't think that that's the focus of what we're talking about. But what we have is a nexus of cultural institutions, just around Union Street, as you've pointed out, and they're underutilized. From the perspective of the institutions. The library can handle a lot more business than it currently gets, although it's doing well. The Whelan Museum, I'm sure, could. The Custom House certainly could. And when the church is there, you'll be a part of that mix too. And the other thing, although I really hate to mention it, is that it is one of the solutions to our parking problem in Sag Harbor. That if you have more people utilizing that area, they will begin to understand that they can park there, and they're not very far from the rest of the village. Right now, most days when people are screaming, "I have no place to park," it's because they think they can only park in those angled spots on Main Street. But just a couple of blocks away, there's lots of unused parking spaces. So that's another, it's not the main issue, but it's another factor that we consider.
I think also they're cultural institutions which carry with them a tacit understanding you should be quiet. Right? A library, a museum.
Not anymore. No, that's actually, as a person who works in the library, I'll tell you that is an old idea about libraries. We don't go there at all anymore, except in the rotunda. We set aside the rotunda as a quiet workspace. The rest of the library, if people tell us we should be quiet, we tell them, no, this is a public place, and lots of people use it for lots of different purposes.
Thanks, Eric. Bob, and then
Just,
April.
I wanted to throw in, if you just conceptually, if you think of public space and private space, say public being a park, and private being your bedroom, there's kind of a spectrum along that. And to my mind, the area of Main Street, particularly with the historical homes, is on that spectrum, maybe towards the public side as well, because this is the history of the United States, of Sag Harbor. It's really for everybody to see these homes and know about the whaling industry and look at the trees and so on. So, how do we open that up, I think, is an interesting question.
Jonas actually just said what I was about to say, but since I'm standing up anyhow. No, I will tell you anecdotally, when Eric, my Eric and I, not this Eric, first came to Sag Harbor probably 25 years ago, before we committed and bought something here, we were like everyone else with the frozen yogurt and ice cream in our hands, walking, sort of what Jim said, the pasta, whatever, Italian thing, walking up and down Main Street, but never occurred to us to go further than the monument until one evening we did. And it was shortly after that we decided to live here. We saw the Hannibal French house. We went further up. We saw the Whaling Museum lit up. We saw the library. And I said to Eric, where the hell are we? What is this place? It's fabulous. So, we ended up buying and becoming a part of the community. I loved what Ed said about the streetscape and the streets and the idiosyncratic nature, and then adding what Jonas said about the historical part. I don't think you can understand Sag Harbor and love Sag Harbor without understanding the residential district, and in fact, and fully appreciate it, and want to protect it. So I think encouraging that move south, for sort of, passive visitors and all of us also living here to, encourage people to enjoy it. I know for a fact that when I walk into down Main Street into town for an errand, and if I see somebody who seems like they don't know where they are, maybe they're visitors, I'll go right up to them and ask them what it is they're looking for, and oftentimes they're visiting from, France or something, and I'll say, beyond what we have to offer here on Main Street, go look at the residential district. And I'll send them off in a different direction than they had expected to see, and I think to see the beauty of that Whaling Museum and the library is really, takes the experience of Sag Harbor to another level. I think that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
April? I'm not sure.
I wanted to say something. Actually, saying April helped. April put together, and the partnership put together, amazing walking tours, which apps, an app for walking, which I've told people in the past. I encourage everybody to do that. It was a great job. I hope that it's been advertised enough. But it's almost like it should be a prerequisite for anybody coming into town. When you park, you should be given the app to,
Parking the app. April? Can April stay where she is? No. Oh, sorry.
No, I was just going to say, I don't mean to get all vulgar on us, but you know, one of the things that people do on Main Street, and one of the things I always joke about is like, we got to get people to stop just coming to Sag Harbor, eating ice cream, and then going home, which is what partly the idea of the walking tours was. Is there room at the library, the Custom House, or the Whaling Museum to put a coffee and ice cream concession? Because honest to God, I think that if people thought of it as being like a place where they could like hang out and eat something, because people just are crazy about eating, that might just do it. Like just if there was just a sense of there being like a little, yeah, what do you call that when people want to eat? Yeah, maybe even a food truck, an ice cream and coffee food truck. Just a thought. But I don't know, like, what I know, so the Long Island Preservation Society or whatever it is, like, would they let the Custom House do that with the library? Is there room at the library, or?
The library, I can't speak for the library board or the director, but I know that we've had constant conversations about the idea of doing something like that. And so I believe the answer is yes. We would be excited to do something like that.
You could see that. You could see that in your plaza during the summer. You know, so, you know, put a little, not a hot dog truck necessarily, but an umbrella down there, and like a little billboard sign out on the. Kind of fun.
I'll just say, you know, Linley and I are co-presidents of the Whelan Museum, and we talked about this a lot. And I think we might even have more room at the Whelan Museum to do it than at the library.
No, we want it.
I'm also a trustee of the library, Eric, so you can come there too.
Also, when you go to France or Italy, oftentimes, I mean, in the Tuileries, there's like tons of little coffee and ice cream places. It's like, why couldn't Mashashimuet Park have a little coffee shop?
Well, and that's one of the questions about Steinbeck Park, too. Should there be food and drink, which I think, yes, if you could mention this to Kathleen Mulcahy, our mayor, that you think it's a good idea.
The Chamber of Commerce, the Main Street might not like it because it's competition.
Well,
but the park and the museum.
no.
You don't need that. You don't need that at the park. It's like there's plenty of. I mean, there's Yummylicious and there's Olaf's. I mean, it's right there. So that you don't really need that there, but the library. Oh my God.
Or say a nouveau sort of Latin American place. Little concession down there, maybe. Margaritas at 5.
Well, Jim Larocca had suggested a margarita machine for Steinbeck Park for sunsets.
Well, you know, the library, the library has this new book bike that we take around to various venues to either give away books or let people check out books without coming to the library. And the same person who makes those also makes mobile coffee carts and mobile ice cream carts. So we could use something like that, and it could be in various locations at various times.
Jesse.
I think I can be this way, right? Sorry. So, Jesse Matsuoka. Funny enough, I will plug in that we are considering to make a taco cart starting next summer, so we'll see where we can plug that in. But on another note, just to be the devil's advocate, I know we're keeping everything very positive with this beautiful walking village. One thing I want to kind of put towards the board, and maybe just the mayor, is there any talk or discussion on the safety of the sidewalks, of like redoing the tripping hazards and redoing the it is part of the charm of Sag Harbor, which I think is beautiful, but I myself trip over them, and I've been walking them for the last 20 plus years. I should, maybe less margaritas and sake, but I also have a lot of customers that come down in my establishments that are actually not having anything, and they trip right into everything. I see them tripping and falling into the trees, tripping and falling into the streets. There's just a lot of tripping hazards, and I was just wondering if there's any talk or discussions on updates.
So, in the Express, thank you, this week, did a asking people about sidewalks, and we have gotten we are getting the full list of all the things, and I've given it to D. Yardley and asked him to, he and I are going to next week drive around and look at every single one that is talked about that are in the village that we have something we can do about.
Right. But one of the biggest culprits of these sidewalks are the beautiful trees that line the streets. And we don't want to kill all the trees, but that's, I mean, where most sidewalks heave up, they heave up because of tree roots. And an unsuspecting, good-natured, good-willed soul would say, well, if I just cut this root, then I could put the sidewalk back flat, which will be a lot safer. So there's a balance we have to achieve, Madam Mayor.
Yes. So there is a balance, but that is something we're going to look at, but we are going to try to fix it. I also, on a long-term basis, one of the things we do have in long-term planning is sidewalks on every street within 1.5 miles of the village, so that everyone can walk to the village within a...
Yeah, Marilyn Holstein, Sag Harbor Chamber of Commerce. So can you also look at Marine Park, please? Because we've had a lot of people with the Arts and Crafts Fair have been stumbling right around there. So with that whole thing, I'd hope you would look at it. Thank you.
We will.
Sounds like people are just drinking way too much.
I don't know, about 10, 12 years ago, there used to be a pamphlet that I picked up somewhere that was a walking tour. And if that was, if we had something like that, gives a little history of some of the houses and things, and people could pick it up anywhere in the village, it might encourage people to walk a little further.
You can pick that up at the Windmill and at Village Hall. It still exists.
Okay. Sir?
Hi, I'm Noel Hankin, Nineveh Beach. That's the eastern edge of Sag Harbor. I really learned a lot today. I just want to thank the panel and all the information, great comments. 2 points I'd like to make. One, I love dogs, but I see a lot of dog stuff on my beach. I'm on the beach in Sag Harbor. And so what I think would be helpful in Havens Beach is to have a dog area that's fenced, because everyone who comes to the beach takes their dog off the leash, and you're not going to stop that from happening. So if there's a penned area, dogs can meet each other, owners can meet each other, I think it would be a solution. The second point is 114 is in terrible shape. You drive down near my house, it's so bumpy, it's dangerous. I know it's a state road, but we need to lobby the state to get it fixed. Thank you.
These are the things I love to be able to announce. So our assemblyman, Fred Thiel, has just gotten a deal, and they are fixing 114. We have given them a list from East Hampton all the way to the ferry. We've given a list of every part of 114 where we have major issues, as has East Hampton, as has North Haven, and that work will start this. It will absolutely not start in the summer. That we made clear as part of the list, but it will be done over the winter and as soon as this winter and this spring.
Wow.
Thank Fred Thiel. Thank your assemblyman.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, this is probably a very pedestrian question, or a thought. Thank you. And I don't know what it's called, the body of water across from Mashashimuet Park, where the Christmas tree is. Otter Pond, okay. Can that be developed maybe with a boardwalk or something and a carousel in the middle?
No.
No?
It belongs to the park, and it's DEC monitored. We cannot do much there except try to keep it.
Because that area just seems to be a beautiful,
Yeah, it's beautiful. There's some
unused-
benches there you can sit at.
Yeah, but not enough.
Take a kayak on it. I don't know, but we can't put a boardwalk
Take a
around
kayak
it.
on it?
Well, you could.
Oh, yeah?
Anything you want. Maybe we
there
should have a
be
little
kayak
concession.
stand.
A little
Yeah,
concession.
And a concession to bring people to it. And I once I was in advertising and worked on the Committee for Central Park, and we did an Adopt a Bench program. We did an Adopt a Bench program, and it was usually successful. Of course, it was the city. you know, but it's not a bad idea that to do some of these, you know, benches to share and, okay, all right.
Thank you. Any other questions out there? Oh, yes, we have one in the back. You're making me work out here, aren't you?
Hi, I'm Susan Moyer, and I'd like to ask about parking. And with all the people that we're talking about bringing into the village and our beautiful spaces, where are these people supposed to park? And people like me who live just outside the village and used to walk, but am getting a little too old to do the loop and walk in and out of the village. I can't park to use the post office, the IGA. I get everything by mail, Amazon, Optimum, RX, because it's so hard to come in and out of the village. Are we talking about any solutions to expand parking? Is
Sure.
it even possible?
If I can just take a quick stab at it, I think parking is just one of those. It's like taxes. We're not going to solve that problem. Nobody wants to pay them. Everybody wants the revenues. We're a popular destination. A lot of people want to come here, and most people drive here. Unfortunately, I think it's always going to be an issue. Now, there are ways we can make it easier for you to run into the post office or go to the 5 and 10 or the Wharf Shop or any of our wonderful businesses. But we're talking a lot here about walking and biking, and these are ways of getting around that take up a lot less space. So the more we can do to encourage people to use these modes, that is a parking space saved. And if it were super comfortable for you to walk, you might be inclined to park a little bit further away. So these are these concepts that we were talking about. If there were fewer trip hazards, if there was less flooding. Let's think of for a moment about if you walk from the post office to the flagpole. Those sidewalks are extremely narrow. Or if you walk further towards Barron's Cove, the sidewalk actually disappears. So these are subtle ways that we're saying to people who might walk, don't walk here. It's not safe for you. So as much as we can do to make it more comfortable for people to walk, I think we'll be, sorry to use a corny term, but having synergy in terms of getting people to park a bit further away and getting people to walk a bit more.
Nada.
Can I just say that Mayor
Go right.
Mulcahy gave us a wonderful work session on the parking and pointed out, first of all, that we have some 10-minute short terms in front of on Main Street where you may just want to pick up a few things, or 30-minute parking spot. Now, and also the number of, maybe Kathleen, you can say, the number of spaces or distance from the wharf to the, Kathleen, you'll remember that.
So there are as many spaces from the wharf to where we are right now at the hotel. There are that many spaces going that way as well. That again, and it's really a lot of what Eric and Jonas and everyone has been talking about, that are up on the other side that just are not being utilized. But there are also a couple of things coming down the pike. Some, they will be announced within the next month or two of different parking solutions and starts, at least for the summertime, that will help alleviate some of the things. So hold tight. My biggest aha in this job is that it takes a long time to get things done here. So we are coming. There are some things. Just don't even keep your fingers crossed, but just hold on. It's coming.
Thanks, Kathleen. Yes, John.
Hi, John Leonard. I'm also a member of the board of the Sag Harbor Chamber of Commerce, and I'd kind of like to just give us, our organization, a plug here. All the things that we're talking about today are very important in terms of creating a community, and I love that we're being so forward thinking, and things like the two words I kept resonating in my head, dog park, that these are actually being considered now. And I think that now is the time for us to be thinking about what we do with our public spaces. The Chamber of Commerce it provides some of the largest public programming that we have here in the village. We are a solely volunteer organization. We are always looking for additional programming that we can put on, but we also need help with the programming that we do put on. And, there's always a consideration for us as we move forward into the future as to whether or not we're going to be able to put on the great programming that we already do, like Maryland working with the Arts and Crafts Fair, Harbor Fest, Harbor Frost, all of those kinds of things. So that's really what makes our community. If anyone has ideas for additional programming they'd like to see Sag Harbor Village and the Chamber of Commerce do, we'd be open to hearing about that. We'd love for you to come to any of our meetings. You can come and find any one of us, and we can talk to you about when we meet, and also help us with the programming that we already do have in place. Thanks.
Thanks, John. Arden? I think we're going to, excuse me. Oh.
I'm Arden Edwards, and I have just a small request that maybe we have one drop box for mailing on the other side of the village.
All right. Okay. If there are no other questions, I think this will probably be a good place to wrap this up. I want to thank you all for coming. This was a lot of fun. I learned a lot today. I want to thank especially our panel, the folks here at the American Hotel. I'm going to pass this off to Ellen before I really forget who I'm supposed to be thanking here. But thanks to all of you for joining us today. This is, as Ellen said, the last one that we'll be doing for the Sag Harbor Express, but I think there are others. Thank you.
I think I thanked everybody up front. I'd like to thank you all for coming, and please check the newspaper and check sagharborexpress.com about what's coming up for January, February, March, April. We will be doing one a month right here at the hotel, and we'll be announcing those soon. So please sign up. The tickets sell fast, and we always sell out.